This is the last chance the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa have to change and turn around the season and ultimately change the narrative around this build, the way this roster is constructed by Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel. Welcome to Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and on today's episode, we're going to detail how this is maybe the most important game of the season for Miami, but also how important this game is for the future of Tua, Mike McDaniel, and Chris Grier building this organization and staying with this group further into their careers. And with the Dolphins' record sitting at 2-6, at really the bottom of the AFC, and they're a half a game away from having the number one overall pick. I mean, the worst record in football is 2-7. The Dolphins are 2-6. They have the easiest strength of schedule of the season to this point. If they were 2-7, they would have the number one pick rather than where they are currently at number 8. So it has not been a good season by any stretch of the imagination for Miami, and it could be even worse if you look at the draft standings. And the reason why this game is so important, in my opinion, is not only for this season, but you need to start instilling confidence into the fan base, into the other people in the organization, that the trio that lead this organization in terms of GM, head coach, and quarterback are the right people in place to get the job done. And I have been very open about how I don't think Chris Grier is at this point. I thought he did some nice moves over the past 3 seasons, like obviously getting Tyreek Hill is a good move, and there's other moves that have been good. There's moves that have been bad, but Grier has done some nice things. It's not all negative for Chris Grier, but this season has been nothing short of a disaster for the Dolphins GM, and it could ultimately lead to him being on the out of this organization after the season concludes. Let's talk about the short term before we move into the long-term importance of this game, because if you're 2-6 and you have any hopes to make the playoffs, you have to rattle off 8 wins in your last 9 games. I think 10-7 will get the job done. There's an outside chance that 9-8 could sneak you into the playoffs with teams like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Denver, Los Angeles, not being the best, in Los Angeles Chargers that is, not being the best teams that are all fighting for that 7th spot in the postseason. So maybe you can get away with winning 7 of your last 9 rather than 8 of your last 9, but I believe it has to be almost a clean sweep here of 8 of your last 9 to get to double-digit wins. That's just my opinion. We'll see if that ultimately is the truth or not. But the reason why this one's so important is because the next couple games on your schedule are relatively easy. You play the Rams in Los Angeles on Monday Night Football this week. If you win that game, you're now 3-6 with 2 games in a row at home against the Las Vegas Raiders and New England Patriots, 2 of the worst teams in football, and 2 teams I can confidently say that are worse than the Miami Dolphins. So ideally, if you do win against the Rams, a decent squad here who has won a couple games in a row, Stafford's playing well, Nakua, Kupp, Kyren Williams, you could win 3 in a row here and be right back into the race at 5-6 before that Thanksgiving Thursday night football game in Lambeau against the Green Bay Packers, which would be an absolute brutal game for Miami to try to attempt to win. But you see the pathway to at least get back into the season if you're able to win this week against the Rams. So if you have a hope to make the postseason, this game is the last chance, because even with the 2 games against the Raiders and Patriots on the horizon, if you are 2-7, you're likely not going to win, because after that Green Bay game, the Dolphins would have 5 games after that: Jets, Texans, 49ers, Browns, and Jets again. Obviously, 3 on the road, in Houston, in Cleveland, in New York, at home against San Francisco and the Jets. And you can sweep the Jets. I think that's possible. You'd probably beat the Browns in Cleveland, even though it's cold conditions. That team is not playing well. And then the games against the 49ers and Texans are going to be the 2 difficult ones. But say you do go 4-0 in this stretch where you beat the Rams, Raiders, and Patriots, and then pull off a miracle in Lambeau on Thanksgiving, and you're 6-6 going into the final 5 games of the year. I think that is a very advantageous 4-1 stretch there where you can go the 10-7 that you have to make the postseason. So I do think it's possible for Miami to make the playoffs if they do go on a hot streak here, but it all starts with this one, which is why it's their last chance. Because if they lose this one against the Rams, there is no chance that they make the playoffs because they're not going to win the final 8 games, which is, once again, what I think it requires to make the postseason this year. We're going to talk about the long-term importance of this game as well in just a second. But we do have to tell you about Game Time, the number one way to get your tickets. Game Time is the best ticketing app, whether you want to go see the Dolphins play in person, go to a comedy show, concert in your local area. Game Time is the best way to get your tickets with so many great features like Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They also have all-in pricing, which shows you the total price of your ticket up front rather than getting blindsided by fees at checkout. And they have the lowest price guaranteed. If you find a different service with a lower price on the same exact ticket, same exact section, row, event, whole 9 yards, they'll actually credit you 110% of the difference. Another reason why Game Time is the best. Their user-friendly app as well as customer service is second to none. It's why whenever I go to an event, I purchase my tickets with Game Time, and I would tell y'all to do the same, not only because of how easy it is, but also because of the deal we got rolling here at Dolphins Today. When you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS when you sign up to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, first purchase only, but again, CHATSPORTS gets you $20 off your first purchase. Shout out to Game Time for sponsoring today's show. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. What time is it? It is game time. All right, as we continue here with the video and talk about how important this game is long-term for the Miami Dolphins, because we talked about how important this is to turn this season around. Well, the reason why it's also important long-term is because if you do not turn this season around, it becomes more and more likely that Mike McDaniel could be on the hot seat. I don't think he gets fired, but his seat could warm up a little bit after this season. Chris Grier's seat is already a little warm from the fan base. I don't know about Stephen Ross and this ownership group, but it would start the heat up definitely if you lose and continue to lose this season and finish in the top 5, top 10 of the NFL draft. So getting back into the hunt, getting back into the season is super important for this trio of Tua, McDaniel, and Grier, because fans already are not sure if Tua is the long-term franchise quarterback of this organization. He got the contract, but many don't believe he deserves it. Some people are on Tua's side, some people aren't. And the only way to shut that up is if Tua is able to go out there, continue this hot streak of offense that Miami's had over the past 2 weeks, where they've scored 27 points against the Cardinals, 27 points against the Bills, unfortunately lost because of defensive efforts, but the offense is starting to get cooking a little bit here. If that continues, Miami averages 25-plus points per game for the final 9 games of the season, and this team wins games to get back to 500 or back into the playoff hunt, the fan base, the organization will start to feel more comfortable about the contract they handed to Tua Tagovailoa and his long-term prowess to lead this football team. And you can go across the board with this as well. Mike McDaniel, if the Dolphins continue to spiral and lose and he loses the locker room, do they believe McDaniel's the right man to lead this football team in, week out for seasons to come? He's a great offensive mind, but is he a leader of men that can help lead a championship back to Miami? I think that's a question that would be asked if the season continues to spiral. And going on Chris Grier as well. He put together this roster, and this roster is going to face a lot of decisions in the offseason as well in terms of should they move forward with some of these veteran contracts? How do they address the offensive line, backup quarterback? You only have $4.4 million in projected cap space entering 2025 offseason. How are you going to upgrade this roster that obviously needs to be changed because the team isn't doing well right now? But like I mentioned, if you somehow rattle off a big win this week against the Rams and then go on a run to get back in the hunt and even make the postseason, well, then people might say, okay, maybe we treated this team a little too harshly, and if Tua didn't miss the 4 games due to the concussion and they go 2-2 in that stretch instead of 1-3, or even go 3-1 in that stretch playing teams that aren't that good like Indianapolis and Tennessee, which you lost to, which you might have won with Tua, well, then maybe this team would have won 11, 12 games and had a real threat to make the Super Bowl because they would have had a better standings in the AFC conference. So these are questions that will be answered potentially if the Dolphins are able to get a win this week. It also could be answered if they lose. That's why I think this is the last chance for these Miami Dolphins, as well as Tua Tagovailoa, to prove that this season is not over. 2-7, it is done. 3-6, there's a glimmer of hope with 2 easy games coming up in the next 2 weeks against the Raiders and Patriots. This game is very important to all 3 people. Tua, Grier, McDaniel. Will they get a win? That is the important question. And with just over 24 hours away from that game getting kicked off, let me know who you got in that one. MIA for the Dolphins, LAR for the Rams. Make sure you're subscribed as well. Different type of video here where we're just talking about the state of this football team and why this game's so important. But make sure you're subscribed. We'll be live on Monday night, an hour before kickoff for Rams, Dolphins, Monday Night Football.